The world of horror gaming has given us a plethora of spooky boys and girls over the years, with the likes of Slender Man, Alma Wade, and Pyramid Head sending chills down many a spine. However, it's not only horror games that can serve up the creepy lads and lasses, with more and more non-spookums titles opting to include characters that wouldn't look out of place in your average haunted house. For this list, we're looking at the moderately freaky ladies and gents from the entire world of video gaming, excluding, of course, any games where their aesthetic might actually fit in. We're not worried if they're good guys or bad guys. All slightly spine-chilling friends or foes are welcome here. Keep in mind, though, that we might be sneaking into spoiler territory for one or two of these games, so don't say we didn't warn you. I'm Peter from TripleJump, and here are 10 spooky characters in non-horror games. Number 10. MINIBLINS, The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker. You might not expect a game that looks as colourful and adorable as The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker to have any characters even approaching spooky, let alone a whole bunch of impish creatures that look like tiny angry demons. Alas, the game did include such beasts, introducing the world to MINIBLINS, small irritating enemies that are more than happy to pop up and give our hero a whole load of grief. First seen in the Wind Waker's flooded world, these small, horned, glowy-eyed chaps can be found on multiple islands across the Great Sea, and will often jump out, pitchforks at the ready, to terrorise Link at the most inconvenient of times. Perhaps the most inopportune of these occurrences is whilst Link traverses the Forsaken Fortress. Although the MINIBLINS pose only a minor threat in and of themselves, disappearing into a puff of smoke with a single strike of most weapons, on this occasion, our boy is unarmed, meaning that the trident-wielding devils can easily overwhelm him if left unchecked. Troublingly, should Link try to run away from the little tykes near water, they will, for reasons unknown, choose to drown themselves. Are you guys alright? Do you want me to call your mums? Number 9. Clanker, Banjo-Kazooie. We're not quite sure what it is about Clanker that makes us slightly uneasy. After all, he's a perfectly affable chap, but we can't help but feel a little spooked by the poor fella. Perhaps it's the large, staring eyes, the mouthful of razor-sharp teeth, or the bits of flesh sticking out of his metallic shell. After entering Clanker's cavern in the original Banjo-Kazooie, we find him in desperate need of rescue after being chained up and used as a garbage disposal by Grunty. After we take a tour of the murky depths and release him from his bonds, he's incredibly grateful and is even kind enough to reward our eponymous heroes. Due to the rest of Banjo-Kazooie being a largely colourful and cartoonish affair, though, Clanker's appearance does come as something of a harsh juxtaposition. It's unclear what kind of creature he's even supposed to be, presenting largely as a shark, but with a blowhole like a whale. At first glance, Clanker appears entirely mechanical, but look a little more closely and you'll find he's partially organic, with muscles and various other fishy bits poking out between all of that sheet metal and rivets. That all sounds rather painful. Do you think we should get him some WD-40? Anyone? Number 8. Jack Skellington, Kingdom Hearts. Oh look everyone, it's a wildcard entry, are you scared yet? Yes, we're well aware that Jack Skellington did not, in fact, originate in video games. However, I'm more than willing to fight anyone who tries to tell me that the Pumpkin King himself doesn't deserve a spot on this list. Though moderately unsettling in appearance, bearing long, gangly limbs and a skull-like head complete with eyeless sockets and a huge mouthful of crooked teeth, what Skellington lacks in cuddly exterior, he more than makes up for in sheer incompetence. Not content with having already destroyed Christmas in Tim Burton's 1993 masterpiece, The Nightmare Before Christmas, the hapless Jack decides to really kick things up a notch in Kingdom Hearts by accidentally setting the Heartless loose upon Halloween Town. they swiftly proceed to wreak utter havoc, and Sora, Donald and Goofy must swoop in to save the day. By the time we meet him again in Kingdom Hearts 2, Jack has clearly had some sort of amnesia spell as he decides, once again, to try and take over Christmas. Chaos ensues and Skellington is forced for a second time to save Santa from the clutches of the evil Oogie Boogie. Just don't anyone tell him about St. Patrick's Day Town. You can't imagine the anarchy he'd cause with a few Guinnesses inside him. Number 7. Pumpkin, Castlevania Lament of Innocence. Though Castlevania Lament of Innocence's Pumpkin might not be winning any prizes for being the most terrifying video game character of all time, he'd certainly be shortlisted for the slightly spoopy playable character that takes the most amount of faff to unlock award. In order to unlock Pumpkin, you must complete the game as Leon. You'll then need to start a new game, enter @Joachim into the name entry screen, and finish the game again as Joachim. Only after playing through the game no less than twice will you be able to play through it as Pumpkin. Look at his little face though. What sort of monster wouldn't go through all that trouble just to unlock this adorable little squash? Don't be fooled by his cute yet slightly spooky outward appearance though, because Pumpkin is a force to be reckoned with. Armed with the Vampire Killer Whip and Pumpkin sub-weapon, which will bounce towards enemies before exploding, the character can easily hold his own in any fight. Admittedly, he's a bit of a glass cannon, boasting superior strength but low health, but he's still an awful lot of fun to play as, bringing a bit of levity to an otherwise straight-laced game. Number 6. Booze, the Mario series. It might just be me, but regardless of whether or not a spectral entity is aimed at kids, they still give me the heebie-jeebies. It must have been a quarter of a century since I last watched The Spooks of Bottle Bay, but that tartan ghost still gives me nightmares. Who the hell thought this was suitable for children? Anyway, I digress. First appearing in 1988's Super Mario Bros. 3, Boos, or as they were known back then, Boo Diddlies, are phantom enemies that pop up frequently throughout the Mario franchise to give a little fright to the titular plumber and his friends. Though they'll hide their faces if you look directly at them, the moment you look away, they'll be ready to chase you down, Weeping Angel style. Though appearing as little more than a small cluster of white pixels in the earlier games, the appearance of the Boos has evolved over the years, taking them from barely distinguishable blobs to moderately frightening entities. Fair enough, the Boos are probably not going to give you any actual nightmares, but you take one look at those beady little eyes and massive sharp fangs, and tell me you wouldn't be at least a little bit shaken up if you met one in a dark alley. Go on, I dare you. Number 5. Granny Rags, Dishonored. Admittedly, Dishonored and its sequel are not exactly the most happy-clappy games in the world today, but whilst they do lean heavily into gothic themes, they're not exactly what you'd call horror, and therefore they do qualify for this list. Someone who clearly didn't get the memo about not being too spooky, however, is the first game's elderly witch, Vera Moray, aka Granny Rags. Though her outward appearance can be described as little more than somewhat dishevelled and slightly disconcerting, it's not her looks that would have us running for the hills, rather her penchant for dark magic and her proclivity for, culinary arts. If players have assisted the woman earlier in the game, they'll find her later on preparing to murder, cook, and eat Slackjaw. Now, fair enough wanting to off the guy, he is the head of a criminal faction and has a rap sheet longer than your average Pink Floyd song, but, you know, the cannibalism bit seems a bit far. As though that weren't weird and creepy enough, despite being killed by Corvo at the end of Dishonored, her disembodied left hand is discovered in the sequel by the Howler's gang leader, Paolo, and used in an attempt to assure his own immortality, reanimating in the process and attacking the protagonist. Bad hand. Stop that right now. Oh, God, it's like the Addams Family. Number 4. Pyro Jack, aka Jack-O-Lantern, the Shin Megami Tensei series. When you think of demons, your mind probably goes to the legions of Hellspawn from the likes of Doom, or maybe the soul-devouring kind you might find in Demon's Souls. What probably wouldn't spring to mind, though, is an adorable, if slightly spooky, pumpkin-headed chap in a cape. Appearing throughout the Persona series, or Shin Megami Tensei series if you want to get serious about this, Pyro Jack, aka Jack-O-Lantern, is one of the many titular personas. Prior to becoming a demon, Jack was an Irish farmer that ended up cursed to wander the land and scare travellers into losing their way. Throughout the series, his appearance stays much the same. A smiling pumpkin with glowing eyes for a head, topped with a brimmed pointy hat, a black cape for a body, and a single gloved hand clutching a lamp. Though he may not sound like much, and his visage is more likely to make you say "ah" than "ah," Pyro Jack is quite handy with fire, as his name might suggest. He even appears as a boss battle, but although he's one tough cookie, or rather one tough slice of pumpkin pie, he's easy enough to bring down with a couple of ice attacks. Fitting, I suppose. Number 3. The Lubberkin, The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. If you haven't played The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, then first of all, what are you doing? Those are the writer's words, not mine. I've also not played it yet, but I want to. Those who have played the game will know that friendly monsters are few and far between. And although the odd Doppler or succubus can be found living a fairly innocuous life, most of the beasties you'll come across deserve nothing more than a few good whacks with your silver sword. It's almost heartwarming then when, whilst helping a baron find his wife and daughter, we encounter a botchling, a small creature that preys on pregnant women, whom we can transform into a friendly being. Geralt can make the choice to just outright kill the thing, or he can choose to perform a ritual to transform it into a Lubberkin, a guardian spirit. Though entirely benevolent, the Lubberkin's appearance is less Casper the Friendly Ghost and more the stuff of nightmares. From the neck down, it looks more like an ordinary, albeit spectral, baby. However, its face is one that only a mother could love, retaining the horrifying countenance of its former botchling self. Looks aren't everything, however, and as frightening as this ethereal creature is to look at, its assistance in finding the Baron's family more than makes up for it. Thanks, Lubberkin. Number 2. Ghastly, Haunter, and Gengar, the Pokemon series. What's this? I hear you cry. 3 entries for the price of 1? Why, Peter, you do spoil us. Now, whilst my munificence is indeed well known throughout the land, the inclusion of Ghastly, Haunter, and Gengar under 1 entry is less to do with my overall magnanimousness and more to do with the fact that we found it almost impossible to pick just one of these spooky boys for this list. First seen in Lavender Town's Pokemon Tower in red and blue, we find Ghastly and Haunter, haunting the graves of deceased Pokemon. In a world otherwise populated by bright, colourful, cutesy creatures, these ghost-type Pokemon are a much-needed injection of the lightly macabre. Although Gengar can be evolved from Haunter via trading, we don't actually properly meet one until Pokemon Diamond and Pearl, where there is a small chance to battle one in the old chateau. Not only does this trio of spectres look quite imposing, but they're also not to be trifled with. Due to its body being mainly of gas, Ghastly is able to render itself almost invisible, sneaking up on its enemies. Gengar takes great pleasure in tormenting others, and Haunter is able to literally lick things to death. Great, now I'm dead and covered in slobber. Thanks, pal. And number 1, Scarecrow, Batman Arkham Asylum. When we all booted up Batman Arkham Asylum for the first time all the way back in 2009, we expected to don that tight latex batsuit and just have some fun kicking the proverbial poop out of a smorgasbord of increasingly wacky villains. We did not expect to have the proverbial poop scared out of us by Dr. Jonathan Crane, aka Scarecrow. For one thing, Scarecrow's appearance alone is enough to give us nightmares. He's decked out from head to foot in dirty patchwork, his face completely obscured by a burlap sack and gas mask. Oh, and did I forget to mention that each of the fingers on his right hand has a massive syringe attached to it? Did I? Yeah, I did actually, but I just said it there, so you should be satisfied now. As though his freaky attire weren't enough, this nutty professor, I know he's a doctor, not a professor, but at this point I'm too scared to care. This nutty professor keeps unleashing his patented fear toxin on the residents of the asylum, causing those trapped inside to hallucinate their worst fears. This causes poor Brucey Dubs to see visions of a dead Commissioner Gordon the night his parents were killed, and a gargantuan scarecrow that stalks him across the asylum's rooftops. Oh God, please make it stop. I'm glad we've reached the end of this video, to be honest. See you later.